Okay. Allow me to share my screen. And tell me if you're able to see it in proper view.
Yes.
Good. So, this is the title of my presentation of my paper, Comics Are a Marvelous Tool for Your English Classes. And allow me now to hold your attention regarding comics, and let's see together how we can introduce them into our English classes. So, this is the first question I'm launching to you. Are you looking for nice resources to motivate your students and also help them develop their English competencies? And the answer is here. You should use comics because they are great learning tools for your English classes, and you don't have to use pencils and paper unless you want to. And this is the table of contents. First of all, the first section, what is a comic? The second, comics as an educational tool. We shall see together how to decode visual and linguistic signs. Moving next to comics that may support language learning. And we shall see together what comics to use for our English classes. And then the two formats, broadly known formats of comics, which are print and digital. And finally, we shall draw some conclusions together. So let's get down to history now. And we know that from prehistoric times, people have used written symbols and representational signs as means of communication. And they did that in the form of pictorial drawings, cuneiforms, hieroglyphs. And these enigmatic cave and rock paintings, which you are going to see next, are considered an effective liaison between the ancient ways of human expression in vernacular circumstances and the visual manifestations in modern day-to-day life. So as societies developed, pictograms have evolved as well. And not only in terms of what they represent, but also in terms of emotional impact upon the viewers. So these are some examples I have provided for you. For example, cave paintings of a single stag represented in different stages of motion. And you can see them in Lascaux, France, or the marble carvings of the Greek Parthenon, or Trajan's military campaign in 101-106, if I remember well, against Dacians, represented on his famous column. Okay, and also the almost intact Bayeux tapestry depicting the Norman conquest in 1066 England. So what about this tapestry? Well, scientists and researchers said it's an example of narrative needlework. Okay, so this is a 70-meter medieval embroidery, which is considered, so pay attention, the forerunner of comics. And here you can see a detail from the Battle of Hastings. Okay, also on this embroidery. But it is the 19th century that indicates the beginning of comics. And this Swiss school teacher and cartoonist Rodolphe Stoffer used to entertain his students and also his acquaintances with his own caricatures and illustrated books. And here you have in the image The Adventures of Mr. Obadiah Oldbach. It was a piece of work also translated into English and published in the USA in 1849. So above you can see, on top of it, you can see the American version, and below the Swiss version. And Goethe himself persuaded Töpffer in 1831 to publish these stories, but unfortunately, Goethe didn't live to see his friend's works published. Okay, so Scott McCloud, very famous American cartoonist and comics theorist, he considers Töpffer as being the father of modern comics. So this is a piece of text and drawings by Rodolphe Töpffer himself in Histoire de Monsieur Cryptogramme. I hope I pronounced correctly in French. Okay, so realized by Töpffer in 1830. You can see text and images displayed in a sequential way, just like comics. So this history of pioneers and stages regarding the evolution of comics point this category as being extremely culturally unique. So it is rather difficult to shape a definition for this display of images accompanied by text, but we can accept McCloud's words, who said that comics are sequential art, rendered as a juxtaposed set of images coming in deliberate order. So these words are taken from Understanding Comics, the second book represented here. I have the Romanian version. Okay, now let's see what kind of formats are there for comics. There are comic strips, okay, so several frames displaying in a logical sense. We have comic books. There are manga. These are Japanese comics, and they have their own style and way of reading. There are graphic novels, and of course, web comics. And we can speak about comics as well in terms of genres. They are adventure, autobiographical, fantasy, horror, humorous, romance, science fiction, and superhero, if you just think about Marvel. So, comics are undoubtedly regarded as entertainment media, and I think you all agree with me. But let's see how we can transform comics into educational tools. And to do that, we need to go to the roots, okay? We need to understand how to decode visually and linguistically the elements of a comics. So first of all, we need to focus on the educational goals when we choose and plan our learning situations. And let's go down to an oldie but goldie pedagogical work, which is Bloom's Comprehensive Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. And these categories are based on the following domains: cognitive, affective, and sensory. And relying on knowledge, emotional, and behavioral experiences, teachers need to find the best learning strategy to cope with the current learning demands. And they are quite heavy, aren't they? So let's keep in mind the three domains mentioned above. And I may go on saying that research conducted and case studies agree on the fact that associating pictures with text in comic books may develop various strategies for communication, which is conveyed through different modes or sign systems. For example, pictures, gestures, pace, sound, or music. So in other words, comics could develop various types of communication, also called multimodal literacy. And I'm pretty sure you're familiarized with this term. And another direction that is associated with text and image is provided by Roland Barthes, okay, the semiotician who analyzed a variety of sign systems. And he also said that if we pertain to linguistic and visual messages, we can analyze them denotatively and connotatively. According to Barthes, we decode messages using socio-cultural codes, and this is a very important aspect. In conclusion, comics, if you turn off the microphone would be great, thank you. Comics represent a relevant example of functional discourse in combination with graphics, okay, carrying socio-cultural marks, socio-cultural marks. Okay, so let's go on with how comics may support language learning. So what do? Teachers can design class activities for students in order to meet specific learning needs, and this is what we do all the time. And of course, students can acquire or develop their competencies in English through different activities based on comics. Let's see now what are the learning benefits of using comics in the classroom. The first benefit would be that comics can shape human characters and behavioral interaction. And we know that children and teenagers are great consumers of comics. Okay, and this aspect tends to empathize with the characters in terms of behavior, speech, even appearance. So, for example, if you take Marvel's young superheroes of Power Pack, there are 4 siblings who are fighting aliens, well, when they not fight one another, of course, and supervillains who embody current social issues, such as bullying, such as pollution, homelessness. Okay, so important social problems brought out by comics. These comics also offer a set of algorithms that help students with visual thinking. What do I mean by that? Well, the frames or the panels promote a certain rigor, okay, a certain conciseness, let's say, in the overall aspect of a comic strip. And together with the general elements inside a panel, which are drawings, speech and thought balloons, text boxes, font type, camera angles, colors, etc., they will form a spatial view, which is also called higher order thinking skills, okay, or HOTS. So that's another important aspect to keep in mind. What other benefits? Well, storytelling and storyboarding enhance writing in an engaging way. For example, storyboarding, and you can have here an image provided by Scott McCloud himself in his book, Making Comics. That's an example of storyboarding and storytelling to use with students in order to expand their writing skills. So what is storyboarding? Images encapsulated in panels. So this first box here is called a panel or a frame, okay? And these images are displayed in a sequenced order, okay? So this is a logical sequenced order. And storytelling, well, it's unfolding a story using narrative techniques in a sequenced order, in the same sequenced order. So storyboarding and storytelling, two important techniques, okay, to enhance your students' writing skills. Another benefit, comics develop receptive and productive skills, having students involved in creative tasks. And in order to improve their reading skills, students can interact, for example, with Shakespeare's plays. You know how difficult is Shakespeare, okay? The original plays. In comic book style with illustrations and abridged or original text. Okay, so they can work collaboratively for storyboarding and storytelling. And of course, they can role play the dialogues. So lots of skills can be involved using comics. Okay, so here we have a site, a useful site with Shakespeare's plays in comic format. Another benefit, so overall the English teachers can use comics with different activities, and some of them are listed below. Students may be asked to fill in the dialogues inside the balloons with lexical items or grammar categories. It depends on what you want them to revise or what you want to teach. You can teach also with comics, not only can you revise or assess students. You can complete or finish the story by providing the missing panel, okay? So in order to have a logical narrative flow of the story, you can arrange panels correctly for jigsaw comics. You can also have them describe the characters orally or in written. Students may summarize the story using storyboards. So first of all, they might not be digitally skilled, but they can use post-its. Okay, so they can write bits of and chunks of narrative lines on those post-its and organize them logically. Students can turn the dialogues into reported speech. They can write opinion essays. Why not, starting from a given panel or comic strip? And of course, one thing they enjoy a lot is to role play the dialogues. And another benefit, comics help children with learning difficulties develop self-esteem. So that's a very important benefit, because it is generally accepted that drawings and art per se are a form of therapy and a method to communicate with non-cooperating children or students, okay, with disabilities. And according to researchers, when they learn with comics, the students with special needs open up and communicate their feelings, their ideas, okay, better. For example, here we have an image with X-Men. This mutant community who are fighting for their social status and acceptance, and students with physical disabilities could gain a sense of inclusion as they read comics about Charles Xavier, okay, who is in a wheelchair. And we can have another talk about students with disabilities later on. But now let's see what kind of comics to use with my English classes. Well, the question above is arguable, taking into consideration that students have, as you know very well, language levels which are different, different age, different preoccupations, different interests. different socio-cultural backgrounds, and of course, different learning needs. So how can we tame comics so as they may serve our teaching purposes? Well, we can use these two formats of comics, the formats I personally know, print and digital. Let's say with the print comics, the known formats are comic books, graphic novels, and comic strips. So they are printed materials. But there is a problem with them. They need to be adapted to curricular demands. So you just cannot use them as they are unless you analyze them properly and thoroughly. They can develop literacy in reading and writing. Why not? And we have already seen how paper comics may come in a palette of brands, styles, and drawings, and that's the reality. Teachers need to analyze them carefully, as I have already told you, before bringing them into the classroom. They can be handy resources when technology fails, so let's admit it. They are more expensive due to production costs, and that's also a fact. But here I give you a hint. The books with peanuts and, let's say, the creepy graphic novel Enya's Ghost by Vera Broxel are to be found in Romanian libraries. I have these books and my daughter really loves them. And these books can be used for English classes. And I can tell you they work miracles. Let's see about digital comics, because this is the aspect that interests us mostly. Okay, so with digital comics, we have web comics and dynamic digital comics. What can we say about them? Well, first of all, they are free of charge. Okay, but you need to subscribe to some platforms. Okay, for example, as far as I remember, Storyboard, I'm sure you have already used these platforms before. Pixum, that's a great tool, and also Make Believe's Comics. So these three platforms I use very well with good results and very good results. They can be realized. So if you indulge yourself in creating your own comics, you will be sure that you can meet curricular demands. Okay, so you just tailor these comics according to your students' learning needs. So you can create comics in order to teach vocabulary, to teach grammar or syntax. Okay, and of course, they are easy to use for any teacher, okay, with basic digital skills. What about for students with learning difficulties? So we go to these students again because that's a very delicate topic, let's say. Students with learning difficulties such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. If you design comics for these learners, pay attention to the type and size of font. Okay, so the font recommended is sans serif. The colors used, you don't have to use very bright colors. Okay. Pay also attention to the overall display of the panels in order to facilitate visually and cognitively your students' comprehension. And here we have a link for more information on comics used inclusively. And you have a quiz here. What font type is appropriate for these learners? And the answer is, of course, the second one, because it's more simple and it's more adapted to students with learning needs. And here is an aspect regarding my own contribution to comics creation. So this is an example of comic strip designed at storyboard that for A2 English level. And here are 3 panels. Okay, that's a comic strip made or formed of 3 panels. And this is a possible activity you can have with them. They can write down the object they see in order to revise vocabulary and then engage in oral activities, simply to describe their own bedroom or their house rooms. They can also try their hand at inserting other characters, okay? So they can create comics by themselves, okay? They can create and they can insert characters or other scenes, okay? So lots of activities can be based on this single comic strip. And moving on to another example, this comic strip here is realized at Picton, for B1 English level. And you can have some seconds to analyze a little bit the comics. So that's a typical teenager who did not inform his parents about his bad mark at the test. So I myself created this. So I can tell you it's very simple to do that. Don't worry. I know it looks rather cool, but it's not very difficult to try your hand at creating this yourselves. And the teacher may ask the students to turn the speech inside the bullets into a reported speech. Okay, so that's an example of activity based on comics. They might continue the story, revealing if clauses by making assumptions regarding Peter's chances to get a new bike, because this is what Peter wants. Okay, I really need my new bike. So students may devise if clauses. Okay, so that's another activity based on comics. So let's see together the conclusions, okay? So we could say that students come across visual and verbal elements in a multimodal approach, and we have already seen that together. They can acquire visual spatial intelligence by comparing the visual and textual interplay of the elements inside a comic strip. Comics are great tools for collaborative work, so for group work during online learning as well, not only in class presence. Comics use a format which is widely accepted and understood by different cultures. So that's a great benefit as well. And comics are adaptable. That's very important to age, gender, religion, nationality, social cultural backgrounds, to knowledge, to educational needs. So what a great palette of usefulness. And I need to pause myself now and thank you for your attention. You can start designing your own comics starting with today. And the language activities based on comics will certainly give you and give your students the chance to shine. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it.